In the bustling corridors of the United Nations, where the fate of nations is often decided behind closed doors, a sense of anticipation hung thick in the air. The world's most powerful leaders, diplomats, and negotiators moved with purpose, their conversations echoing the gravity of the moment. The UN, a symbol of global cooperation and sometimes of gridlock, was about to become the stage for a pivotal event. President Donald Trump, never one to shy away from the spotlight or from controversy, orchestrated a moment of urgency that would draw the eyes of the world. With his signature blend of showmanship and unpredictability, he moved swiftly through the UN's labyrinthine halls, determined to seize the initiative and set the agenda. On September 23, 2025, during the annual General Assembly, a gathering that brings together leaders from every corner of the globe, Trump convened a high-stakes summit. The focus: the devastating war in Gaza, a conflict that had not only shattered lives but also threatened to destabilize the entire region. This was no routine diplomatic exchange. It was a direct, high-risk intervention in one of the world's most intractable and emotionally charged conflicts. The stakes were enormous, and the outcome was anything but certain. Trump's move promised a new, unpredictable chapter in the long and troubled quest for peace in the Middle East. For nearly 2 years, the Israel-Hamas conflict had dominated global headlines with images of destruction and suffering in Gaza, sparking outrage and despair. The humanitarian catastrophe unfolding on the ground had galvanized international calls for action, yet meaningful progress remained elusive. Trump's decision to gather key Arab and Muslim leaders at the UN marked a dramatic break from traditional diplomacy. Rather than relying on back-channel negotiations or incremental steps, he aimed for a bold breakthrough, one that could reshape alliances and alter the course of history where so many others had failed. The world watched with bated breath, aware that the outcome of this summit could either pave the way for a long-awaited peace, or become yet another footnote in the long, often tragic history of failed Middle East initiatives. The stakes had never been higher, and the eyes of the world were fixed on New York. The summit's significance was underscored by the powerful leaders present. Key figures from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Egypt, nations central to any regional agreement, joined the talks. Jordan, Turkey, Indonesia, and Pakistan rounded out the group, representing a formidable bloc from across the Muslim world. Their presence signaled a unified call for resolution, elevating the meeting from a regional issue to one of global importance. Trump's strategy was clear: forge a broad consensus among nations with influence and diverse diplomatic ties. This coalition aimed to exert collective pressure on both Hamas and, indirectly, Israel, with Washington now leading the charge. The agenda before the international community was stark and urgent: a permanent ceasefire to halt the relentless violence, the fate of hostages caught in the crossfire, and the deepening humanitarian crisis in Gaza that threatened countless lives. These were not just political talking points, but matters of life and death, with the eyes of the world watching closely as leaders gathered to debate and decide. The devastation in Gaza was impossible to ignore. Entire neighborhoods lay in ruins, families were displaced, and basic necessities like food, water, and medicine were in critically short supply. Humanitarian aid convoys lined up at the border, waiting for safe passage to deliver relief to those most in need. In the halls of diplomacy, leaders sought to move beyond fragile, short-term truces. Their goal was to secure a lasting end to the violence, a peace that would hold, not just for days or weeks, but for generations to come. The hostage issue was at the heart of the negotiations. Israelis held by Hamas and Palestinians detained in Israeli prisons became symbols of the broader conflict. Proposals for comprehensive exchanges were put forward, with families on both sides desperately hoping for reunification and justice. Humanitarian aid was a major focus as the world called for unimpeded delivery of food, water, and medical supplies. Aid organizations stressed the urgency, warning that every delay could mean more suffering, especially for children and the most vulnerable. The leaders aimed to weave these threads, ceasefire, hostages, and aid, into a single comprehensive package. Each element was deeply interlinked, and progress on one front could unlock movement on the others. A breakthrough on the release of hostages could build trust for a ceasefire, while improved humanitarian access could foster goodwill and stability. Diplomats knew that only by addressing all three priorities together could they hope to break the cycle of violence. The ultimate goal was to create a virtuous cycle, one where peace, freedom and hope would replace Gaza's devastating pattern of conflict and despair. For the people on the ground, every step forward meant a chance at rebuilding lives and communities. Success depended on the world's ability to act with unity and resolve, addressing all three priorities simultaneously and refusing to let any one crisis overshadow the others. President Trump's approach to the Israel-Gaza conflict was marked by a careful balancing act, offering unwavering support for Israel, while simultaneously expressing a new sense of urgency to bring the war in Gaza to an end. As the world watched, Trump sought to position himself as both a steadfast ally and a pragmatic negotiator, navigating the complexities of Middle Eastern diplomacy with his characteristic boldness. Speaking to reporters, Trump declared, "We want to end the war in Gaza, maybe we can end it right now," signaling his desire to be seen as a proactive peacemaker. His words were calculated to project confidence and control, suggesting that with the right leadership, even the most entrenched conflicts could be resolved swiftly. This message resonated with those yearning for peace, but also raised questions about the feasibility of such rapid solutions. In his address to the United Nations, Trump doubled down on his alliance with Israel, making it clear that the United States stood firmly by its side. He demanded the immediate release of hostages, a move that underscored his commitment to Israeli security. However, notably absent from his speech was any mention of Palestinian casualties or the humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza, a silence that drew criticism from international observers and human rights advocates. Trump also used the global stage to criticize NATO allies who had recognized Palestinian statehood, arguing that such moves only emboldened Hamas and undermined prospects for lasting peace. He framed the two-state solution not as a path to reconciliation, but as a potential victory for those he viewed as adversaries of Israel, further polarizing the debate and complicating diplomatic efforts. Behind closed doors, Trump adopted a dual approach, presenting himself as a pragmatic dealmaker to Arab leaders, while reaffirming his steadfast support to Israeli officials. This strategy allowed him to engage both sides of the conflict, opening channels for negotiation and dialogue. Yet, it also risked creating confusion about his true intentions, as each side wondered where his loyalties ultimately lay, and whether his promises would translate into concrete action. Trump's overarching objective was clear: to secure a major diplomatic victory that would reinforce his image as a leader capable of achieving what others could not. He sought to be remembered as the president who brought peace to one of the world's most intractable conflicts, using high-profile meetings and bold statements to shape the narrative in his favor. Yet, critics argued that Trump's focus was less on the intricate details of peace negotiations and more on securing an agreement that could be presented as a historic success. The emphasis was on optics and headlines, rather than the painstaking work required to address the root causes of the conflict and ensure lasting stability in the region. As the world watched Trump's moves at the United Nations and beyond, many questioned whether his efforts represented genuine peacemaking or were simply political theater designed to bolster his legacy. The true impact of his approach would only become clear with time, as the region continued to grapple with the challenges of war and the elusive hope for peace. Reactions to Trump's summit were a mix of cautious optimism and diplomatic restraint. Turkish President Erdogan called the meeting very fruitful, hinting at a forthcoming joint declaration. Trump's envoy signaled progress, while the UAE confirmed the focus on ceasefire, hostages, and aid. Optimism was tempered by the conflict's complexity and memories of failed peace efforts. The real test, whether these discussions would lead to concrete action in Gaza. Skepticism lingered about Trump's transactional approach and its ability to address deep-rooted grievances. The joint declaration would be scrutinized for real commitments and timelines. The world watched, hopeful but wary of the monumental challenges ahead. Notably absent from the summit was Israel, a deliberate move to first unify Arab and Muslim leaders. The plan present Israel with a cohesive proposal, backed by Washington and the Islamic world. Trump's team insisted this wasn't a snub, but a strategic sequence. A follow-up meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu in Washington would be pivotal. This approach could create momentum for a deal, but also risk alienating Israel if it felt sidelined. The Trump-Netanyahu dynamic would be central, with both leaders under intense domestic pressure. The Washington meeting would test whether the proposal was a credible basis for negotiation or an imposed ultimatum. The outcome could reshape the region's future or reinforce old divisions. The Gaza war's devastation set the stage for Trump's summit. Hamas's October 2023 attack triggered a massive Israeli response, leaving tens of thousands dead and millions displaced. The humanitarian crisis has drawn global outcry and exposed deep international divisions. The US has repeatedly blocked UN ceasefire resolutions, straining alliances and fueling debate over Palestinian statehood. Over 150 countries now recognize Palestine, pressuring Israel and shifting diplomatic dynamics. Amid this turmoil, Trump's summit was a bold attempt to broker peace where others had failed. Trump's UN diplomacy is part of a broader, controversial approach to global crises. His actions on Gaza, Ukraine, and the UN itself reflect a leader eager to disrupt norms and project strength. Critics question whether his focus is genuine peace or the optics of a grand bargain. The world's reaction guarded hope, tempered by realism. The next steps hinge on the Trump-Netanyahu meeting and the content of the joint Arab declaration. Will Israel accept the proposals? Will the US pressure its ally if needed? The coming weeks are critical. Trump's gamble could yield historic peace or become another dramatic episode. The world waits to see if this bold move will finally break the deadlock in Gaza.